Good afternoon and happy Easter to all of you. I trust by this point in time you've had some sort of a spring break and had time to spend with your families, getting a little relaxation in. We are now beginning week 6 of our course. We are 3/4 of the way done, so I hope things are going well for all of you and you are seeing the end in sight. I'm going to start by talking about the discussion board assignment this week. It is asking you to describe your planning process and all the key players who have any influence over the decisions, methods, considerations, and implementation of curriculum at your school site, in your classroom, or within your district. Many of your districts are probably in the process of adopting some kind of new Common Core materials. So as you respond to this, you're going to include support from Chapter 8, which is one of your readings for this week in the Ornstein book. And then you will need to also do some outside research on this topic of stakeholders and their role and influence on curriculum design and implementation. So read and reference an article of your choice that is in some way linked to this topic. And as always, you must include your in-text citations and your full source references. I had a lot of you that missed points the last discussion board that I scored because you did not put in your citation. And I realize it's redundant as far as the text is concerned, but you must get in the habit of doing that. So you'll have 2 sources for this response. One will be from the text and one will be from an article of your choice. In the Ornstein Chapter 8, it talks about implementation as a change process. Think about first yourself as you make changes in your own teaching, and especially with this unit of design that you're working on. And secondly, think about the learning community in which you work and how those changes impact that community. On page 244 of this chapter, there are 5 guidelines that you might want to make note of that say should be followed for successful implementation. I'm also teaching right now the Assisting Change in Education course, and if that is still part of your coursework, you might want to earmark that chapter, those pages for that, because it talks about change in education. Also on pages 259 to 263, it talks about the stakeholders that directly impact what you're doing in the educational field. And thinking about your colleagues, your fellow teachers, the parents, students, and think about all the students that are involved. Look at students as stakeholders within the special ed community, within the gifted community, athletics, your entire student community. You're thinking too as stakeholders of administrators, and you probably have many community members that are also involved in your educational community. So think about how they impact and affect change and how they function as key players. Your school board, for instance, might be another one. Okay, and then for assignment 6, I'm going to be very specific about how I want you to submit this because it's a little bit different than the directions that you see. There is a template. I think most of you have already seen that template. Many of you have submitted it when you submitted your essential questions. Keep that same template, and you're going to focus this week on stage 3 of that template. So you can simply add in these lessons. There will be 5 lessons, at least 5. You may have more. And each lesson does not necessarily have to be a day. A lesson can be a certain block of time. It might take 2 or 3 days. But make sure that you label 5 different lessons. And they can follow one right after the other in that stage 3 as that box expands. Please do not create a new template for every lesson. That is not necessary. Your essential questions that you did a couple of weeks ago remain the same throughout your unit. And your 5 lesson plans will teach the students what they need to know in order to answer those essential questions. So you do not need to create any new questions or change those questions. In stage 3, you're simply noting the lessons that are going into that unit plan. I will tell you, if you're using that particular template, it doesn't always work as a Google Doc. When you go to if you put it in Google Doc form, it doesn't always match up, but that's okay. If you want to do it as a Google Doc, I'm fine with that, just as long as you keep the same basic kind of format. So as I said, it says to use a new template for each lesson, but for my purposes, I really would rather that you used one template with all 5 lessons within that unit together. At the end of these lessons, you will have a 1-page reflection to evaluate the effectiveness of the unit. This is a personal reflection, and it should provide evidence of how backward planning practices affect and inform unit design and assessment practices. So use credible literature to support your ideas, and again, you need to cite and reference according to APA. You can use the article that was posted prior in Chapter 7. You can use any of the articles, if they pertain to this, that you downloaded for your library orientation as well. I'll put a couple of other resources up on the site for you to use if you would like to do that. You must consider some differentiation and include some extensions and adaptions that make sure that you are thinking about all of your students in this unit, and you can indicate these by italicizing them so that I can see them clearly when I'm scoring. It says between each unit, so between each lesson, at the end of each lesson, you can include supplemental materials, assignments, activities that you are going to be doing before you go to the next lesson. If you want to include that, that's fine. It is not mandatory that you include a copy of everything that you're going to use, as long as what you're using is indicated within the lesson plan. And remember that some of those objectives, what you want students to know and be able to do, those objectives should play out within your lesson plan, but again, you don't need to indicate new ones for each lesson. The exception here is that you will be submitting your assessment models at the end of week 8. And this is where it gets a little messy as far as the way this is designed. All I want for this unit submission is for you to indicate what those assessments will be. We're going to talk more next week about assessments, and for your final assignment, you're going to detail those assessments and include a rubric. But for now, all I want you to be thinking about is what those assessments will be. It's actually more beneficial if you craft the ideas for your assessments prior to doing stage 3 learning activities. That's really the way that learning backwards design is designed to be. So if you, for instance, put in some kind of a project at the in your assessment stage 2, just name the project. If it's some kind of a performance task, name that performance task. There's a place in there where it indicates other evidence. And other evidence can be a variety of things. It can be formative assessments that take place throughout the unit, like quizzes or partner talk or observations or group work. It can be a variety of things. So don't get too caught up this week in stage 2. Just kind of indicate in there what your final assessment is going to be. And I will be looking at that more in depth next week, or yes, for week 8 actually. Okay, so it says to cite all the sources within the body of the lesson plan. These can be at the end of the lesson plan. You're also going to have a full page, a full reference page at the end. So just cite your sources, and then at the end put in your reference. So your sources can be, it can be your current textbook or adoptions that you're using. It can be from trainings that you've gone to. It can be from videos. It can be from all sorts of materials that you are using for your lesson plans. If some of your lesson plans include specific strategies like thinking maps or GLAD strategies or other Kagan strategies, you can also cite those in your reference. So make sure that you go over the rubric that's posted. Go over this carefully because it talks about all of the components that you'll need. One of the biggest things that I look for is that all of your components are aligned. So in other words, your instruction, each of these 5 lessons that you are going to be submitting will be aligned to those essential questions. They will help students be able to answer those essential questions. And then your assessment is going to be an assessment of how your students will show you that they have learned the answer to those questions. So pretty much you're going to complete your stage 1 more thoroughly. Some of you already submitted a full stage 1, and if you did that, you're done. That's the that's actually the second box on the rubric. Stage 2 again is your assessment evidence, and again just keep it brief, but tell me what it is that you're doing. And then your focus this week is really on the learning plan, the stage 3. It does ask that you show evidence of technology integration and differentiation. If this is not evident, I cannot give you full points. And that was one of the pieces where some of my students missed points last term, was there was no indication of where technology might be occurring. So whether that technology is in how you as the teacher present the information, how the students access the information, or how students process it on their own is up to you, but please be sure to include some form of technology. And as well differentiation for both high learners and struggling learners. And then again, as we talked briefly about, you're going to have that 1-page reflection on how you are evaluating the effectiveness of this. If you have not yet taught your unit, I want you to reflect on how it's different and how it might affect your students. What you see is different in this process than what you might have done previously. Also within that reflection and the reference page at the end, you are following APA format. And I'm going to say this one more time, stop capitalizing all the words in the title of a source. It's only the first word. So make sure you look at that. So check your rubric before you submit this. If you have questions, please feel free to give me a call or email me, and I'll try and get back to you quickly. And I hope that you enjoy this process. It's not an easy process. It's very thought-provoking. It makes us think more deeply about the work that we do. But I have found through using this process for a number of years in my own district with my own teachers that it's really a beneficial way to think about instruction, and it really leads students to deeper understandings and a more rigorous curriculum. So think on those things as you're working. I hope that it goes well for you and you have a great week, and I will touch base with all of you next Sunday.